I'm Ben Meiselas from the MeidasTouch network. Donald Trump is bragging about just how cowardly he was not to show up in front of the January 6th committee to give testimony and produce documents, and that he ran out the clock so that when the January 6th committee's term expired, Donald Trump would not have to testify before the committee. The January 6th committee, of course, made 4 criminal referrals of Donald Trump, the absentee coward traitor. 4 criminal referrals were made to the Department of Justice and Special Counsel Jack Smith, all legal observers who understand this space, including myself. We've all predicted at various times in 2023 Donald Trump is going to be criminally indicted, but Donald Trump's modus operandi, and this is one of my biggest critiques on MAGA. I have so many critiques. I mean, they're traitors, they're fascists, they hate America, they take actions to destroy our country. They are absolutely and utterly incompetent. Frankly, every action that they take is to destroy our country. They are utterly incompetent, but they are also just a bunch of cowards. They go on their own echo chamber, their own media echo chamber shows, and they spread all this disinformation, and they hold these rallies, now increasingly tiny, small, dwindling rallies in front of their cult, and they all have all this bravado and bluster. But when it always comes down to it, when they always have the time to testify, they always either plead the Fifth Amendment, they take every step in the world to try to file every lawsuit so they don't have to testify about a date that will live in infamy in our country, an insurrection against the United States of America. And if you want to try to both sides the insurrection that took place in the United States of America, well, you are an utter traitor. There is no bottom to the current MAGA Republican Trump cult when they can't look at an insurrection and say, you know what, that was bad. We shouldn't have insurrections. We shouldn't try to have totalitarian, authoritarian wannabes try to overthrow our democracy. Just think about that. That is how cowardly the MAGA Republican Party is. Or it just reveals what their agenda is, which is to topple our democracy. So in a letter dated December 28th, 2022, the chairman of the January 6th committee, the co-chair, Benny Thompson, sent a letter to the lawyer for Donald Trump because when Donald Trump was sent his subpoena, Donald Trump, his lawyers went out there, they went on their right-wing echo chamber media. I'll play the clip for you in a bit. Oh, Donald Trump, I think he will testify. He's going to show up. He's got nothing to hide. And we said here on the MeidasTouch Network, he's a coward. He's a freaking traitor coward. When he was asked the most basic questions, setting aside the January 6th committee for a second, by New York Attorney General Letitia James in the special proceeding which predated the civil lawsuit that Letitia James filed seeking at least $250 million in damages against Donald Trump and the Trump Organization and his adult children, he was asked the most basic questions in a deposition. He tried to avoid the deposition like he always tries to. But then the questions were, well, what's the valuation of Trump Tower? What's the valuation of your property at Bedminster? What's the valuation of Mar-a-Lago? Well, what was the appraised value of this? What was the appraised value of this? What's the appraised value of that? There, you would think Donald Trump would say, well, I'm a billionaire. These are worth hundreds of millions of dollars. No, I plead the fifth. I plead the fifth. I plead the fifth because he is an utter coward and an utter traitor. Here, when it came to the January 6th committee, you have all of the Republican members of Congress, too, who were involved and who were complicity. People like Kevin McCarthy, who knew what was going down. They all refused to cooperate. Just think about what traitors they are, refusing to cooperate into an investigation to try to protect our democracy, and not just refusing to cooperate, but trying to undermine the investigation. That's why we can always say those Republicans are traitors. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And perhaps calling them a traitor is not a strong enough word to describe those traitors, those horrible, horrible people who try to harm our great country and continue to try to harm our country each and every day. But here's the letter. December 28th, 2022, a letter from Chairman Benny Thompson saying, look, January 6th committee, we're done. We finished our report, and therefore the subpoena to Donald Trump is now moot. This is what Benny Thompson said. Dear Mr. Warrington, in my capacity as chairman of the House Select Committee to investigate the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol, I issued a subpoena to your client, former President Donald Trump, on October 21, 2022, regarding various records and deposition testimony. As you may know, the Select Committee has concluded its hearing, released its final report, and will very soon reach its end. In light of the imminent end of our investigation, the Select Committee can no longer pursue the specific information covered by this subpoena because it doesn't exist anymore. Therefore, through this letter, I hereby formally withdraw the subpoena issued to former President Trump and notify you that he is no longer obligated to comply or produce records in response to said subpoena. We appreciate your engagement with the Select Committee on this matter. Benny Thompson. And Donald Trump's response to that was just advised that the Unselect Committee of Political Thugs has withdrawn the subpoena of me concerning the January 6th protest of the crooked 2020 presidential election. They probably did so because they knew I did nothing wrong or they were about to lose in court. Perhaps the FBI's involvement in rigging the election played into their decision. In any event, the subpoena is dead. Just think about the disinformation this freaking traitor propagates to his cult. Just think about it for a second. The January 6th committee is over. The January 6th committee concluded their report is done, and they recommended 4 criminal referrals that would put Donald Trump in prison for the rest of his life if and when the Department of Justice pursues indictments on those charges. The January 6th committee's report is already being cited by federal judges. I did another video earlier about how Judge John Bates, a federal judge in Washington, D.C., has cited the January 6th committee's report for the proposition that Donald Trump's orders that he made on January 6th during his speech on the ellipse was unlawful orders, and that the insurrectionists could not construe that to make a public authority defense that they thought they were following lawful orders. Donald Trump then goes on to claim the 2020 presidential election was crooked and rigged, again spreading more disinformation despite the fact that he lost. He's the biggest loser in over 70 federal courts across the country where his lawyers were sanctioned, disciplined. Some have lost their legal license. That's how frivolous these lawsuits were. And then he goes on to say, perhaps the FBI's involvement in rigging the election. You were the government. It was your FBI. You're such a coward, you're such a fomenter of disinformation that you claim the Republican head of the FBI that you appointed, Christopher Wray, you now claim as a Democrat. He's an agent of the Democratic Party. He's a Republican that you appointed, and when you appointed him, you spoke glowingly of his qualifications. You were the government in 2020 during the November 2020 election. And in fact, you try to take all of these steps from seizing mailboxes to spreading all this disinformation to engaging in all this other voting suppression efforts. You actually tried to rig it. You engage in all those steps utilizing the government to do that. And while Bill Barr and Christopher Wray were willing to cover up for lots of your criminality, they just weren't willing to say that they were secret satellite dishes that were being coordinated from some CIA bunker in Italy that was sending communications to Venezuela, where Hugo Chavez had assembled a secret algorithm that was going to change the votes from you to Biden. Yeah, your people thought that was batshit crazy. They wouldn't go that far, but now you consider them Democrats. They're rhinos. They're too woke all of a sudden because you are a wannabe Mussolini. By the way, I went back and I watched, and everyone should do this too. Go on YouTube and search the March on Rome, where Benito Mussolini, who only had the support at that time of about 20% of the country at that time. 80% supported the constitutional monarchy at that time. And you think that Trump is, of course, there's a reason he's called Mango Mussolini, because he worships Mussolini. And when you go through some of these January 6th transcripts and you see what Donald Trump wanted was to have the National Guard have a procession of him into the United States Capitol building, where he would show up like a conquering hero and overthrow our government. Watch the video, March on Rome, what Mussolini did for Mussolini to gain power. That is exactly what Trump was trying to mimic here to a T. And here you are just, you're celebrating how cowardly you are? Look, let me play this video from your lawyer, Alina Habba. She didn't represent you in this action, but this is a video from Alina Habba, who said that you will testify before the January 6th committee since, quote, you have nothing to hide. And he has no issues being subpoenaed and answering questions about what happened that day. This is what Alina Habba said when you received that subpoena back in October. Play the video.
He's got a couple options here. He can ignore the subpoena and maybe run into a Bannon world, or he can go and plead the fifth, or he can go and testify. Any idea what you think he's going to do, and what would you recommend?
I would recommend that he cooperate, because when you have nothing to hide, that's what I always recommend. The same reason that he always comes out and speaks on any of my cases. He has no issue being deposed, even though the left-wing media would like to pretend that he does. He has no issue being subpoenaed and answering questions about what happened that day, and he shouldn't. What he did was very public, and it was really nothing other than to say to go out peacefully, as we know.
But of course, you're too cowardly. You're too much of a traitor to actually confront someone who's going to cross-examine you. And the same thing with people like your Charlie Kirk of Turning Point USA, with the main social media influencer for right-wing MAGA extremists. It's the same thing with Mike Flynn. It's the same thing with the Nick Fuentes. It's the same thing with Kelly Ward, the lady who screamed at the Arizona rally that Trump led, I'm ultra MAGA. We're all part of an orange mafia. When I watched that video, I was like, this is some of the weirdest stuff. That was the speech where Kelly Ward went, Orange Mafia, we're mafia members, the Orange Mafia. And that's where then Carrie Lake went in after Kelly Ward, and Carrie Lake talked about Donald Trump having big dick energy and that the people in the audience needed to ask their children, or I think she said, go and ask your daughters if they know about big dick energy, to parents in the crowd. That is how degenerative and just disgusting these MAGA extremist traitors are, to go and ask them about big dick energy. First off, they've got the smallest dick energy in the world. They're utter traitors. But just how freaking weird is this? But yes, all of those people I mentioned, I plead the fifth, I plead the fifth, I plead the fifth. I most respectfully plead the fifth. That's what Roger Stone said when he was asked, are fascist overthrows of the government, is overthrowing our government by fascist regimes, is that something that you think our Constitution supports? I most respectfully must invoke my Fifth Amendment rights against self-incrimination. So you believe that there should be fascist coups in the United States of America? I must respectfully invoke my Fifth Amendment right. But here you are. This is a win for Donald Trump, by the way. This is what he's bragging about. He's bragging that he was such a coward that he cannot show up before the January 6th committee. But guess what? The wheels of justice turn. Special counsel Jack Smith now has all of this information. He's got the criminal referrals, which are just that. They're just referrals. He doesn't have to act on them. He's pursuing his own independent criminal investigation as the special counsel. Things will be heating up in 2023, and I look forward to you being indicted and you being brought to justice in our court system, because you have been the most destructive force in our country. You and MAGA and the MAGA traitors who support you, who support insurrection, who support fascism, who support the extremist, who support the division. But it's just so sad and sick and desperate that this is viewed as a win for you, that you filed a federal lawsuit to block the January 6th committee from being able to depose you. The fact that you have Republicans now taking over in the House of Representatives who they want to investigate the investigators, the real people there that they say in their report, the Republicans, the MAGA Republican losers. Oh, this was all about Black Lives Matter on January 6th. And it was Nancy Pelosi's fault, is what these MAGA Republican losers want to say. Oh, and Donald Trump did everything right. That's what these MAGA losers say in their report. What a ridiculous loser traitor cult that is. And we're going to call it out here on the MeidasTouch Network. I know the media likes to go, oh, conservatives and liberals, and this is a very right-wing conservative. No, they're fascists. They are fascists. They are traitors. They are extremists. That is who they are. While Democrats are talking about things like Healthcare, better jobs, improving people's wages, making better infrastructure here in the United States of America, protecting a woman's freedom over her body, protecting people's freedoms to marry who they love. While Democrats are talking about those issues, making healthcare, making prescription drug prices cheaper, lowering the cost of prescription drug prices. How do we help veterans? Republicans are fist bumping as they screw over veterans and trying to deny them the best healthcare for their exposure to toxic burn pits. Are you kidding me? Are you kidding me? Republicans voting against raises to the minimum wage. I mean, are you kidding me? We're going to call out this fascist, traitorous, cowardly behavior each and every time here on the MeidasTouch Network. I'm Ben Meiselas. Until next time, hit the subscribe button. We're on our way to 1 million subscribers thanks to your support. Hit the subscribe button. And in addition, check us out at patreon.com/MeidasTouch, patreon.com/MeidasTouch. Until next time, I'm Ben Meiselas.
At MeidasTouch, we are unapologetically pro-democracy, and we demand justice and accountability. That's why we're spreading our message to Convict 45. That's right, gear up right now with your Convict 45 tees and pins at store.MeidasTouch.com. That's store.MeidasTouch.com.